Darius strolled lazily through the bustling alien bazaar, his sharp eyes scanning the vibrant sea of creatures from across the cosmos. His ragged clothes and unkempt hair masked the immense power lurking beneath his casual demeanor. For the past week, he had lived as a drifter on this forgotten fringe world, seeking any spark of excitement to break the monotony of his existence. The chaotic symphony of alien chatter and the pungent aroma of exotic foods assaulted his senses. Darius scratched his scruffy beard, grimacing at the grime that clung to his fingers. He had certainly perfected the look of a vagrant, but the constant itching was getting more annoying than entertaining. "Maybe I should have tried being a street performer instead," he muttered, drawing puzzled glances from nearby vendors. "At least then, I'd have a reason not to talk to people." A sudden commotion near the marketplace center caught his attention. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a group of burly enforcers surrounding a woman and a small boy. The woman's iridescent silver skin and flowing violet hair stood out even in the diverse crowd. She held her son close, her stance regal despite the fear in her glowing lavender eyes. Darius smirked. Finally, something interesting. He sauntered closer, catching bits of the heated conversation. "Come now, Lady Seraphis," a scarred enforcer growled, his reptilian tail lashing against the ground. "The Dominion's bounty on you and the brat is too high to ignore. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Seraphis's voice was like ice. "I would rather die than go back to that prison of a palace. You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged," another enforcer sneered, reaching for his plasma rifle. Darius's mind raced, piecing together a suitably ridiculous challenge. 3 seconds, hands only. Perfect. "Hey, fellas," he called out, slurring his words just enough to sound drunk. "How about a little entertainment?" The enforcers turned toward him, confusion shifting into amusement at the sight of the disheveled human. "Scram, beggar," the leader spat. "This doesn't concern you." Darius stumbled forward, playing the part of an intoxicated fool. "Aw, come on. I bet I could take all of you down in, let's say, 3 seconds. No weapons, just hands." The group erupted into laughter. Even Seraphis looked at him like he had sprouted a second head. "You hear that, boys?" the leader chuckled. "Looks like we've got ourselves a comedian." Darius grinned, silently counting down. 3, 2, 1. In a blur of motion, almost too fast to follow, Darius struck. His hands became a whirlwind of perfectly placed blows, sending the enforcers crashing into market stalls, unconscious before they hit the ground. The sickening crunch of broken bones and the groans of pain were the only sounds left. Exactly 3 seconds later, Darius stood in the middle of a pile of groaning bodies. He cracked his knuckles, a flicker of disappointment on his face. "Huh," he mused. "That was easier than I thought. Maybe I should have done it blindfolded." Seraphis stared at him, completely dumbfounded. Her son peeked out from behind her, his eyes wide with wonder. What are you?" Seraphis stammered. Darius shrugged, snatching a peculiar-looking fruit from a nearby stall and tossing a few credits to the stunned vendor. "Just a guy looking for some fun," he replied, biting into the fruit and grimacing at the sour taste. "Though I think I picked the wrong planet for that." He turned to leave, already contemplating his next challenge. Maybe he'd try overthrowing a tyrant using only terrible puns and interpretive dance. "Wait!" Seraphis called out, her voice laced with desperation. She grabbed his arm, her touch sending a strange, unexpected jolt through him. Darius arched an eyebrow. Seraphis's eyes darted around nervously. "We need your help. The Dominion won't stop hunting us. I can be your concubine if you'll protect us." Darius blinked, then burst out laughing. Seraphis recoiled, clearly offended. Sorry, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. "It's just a concubine? Really? That's way too easy? And boring." Seraphus's brow furrowed. Easy? Boring? I'll have you know I'm considered one of the most desirable. Darius held up a hand to cut her off. I'm sure you are, Silver, but here's the thing. I don't do easy. He stroked his chin, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Now, if you want a real challenge, how about this? I'll help you, but I'll only use a fraction of my power. That should make things interesting. Seraphus gaped at him. Are you insane? The Dominion will send entire fleets after us. Exactly, Darius grinned. Now that's a challenge. So what do you say? Up for a little galactic adventure? Before she could respond, alarms blared across the marketplace. Dominion troops poured in from every entrance, their black and gold armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Halt! A mechanized voice boomed. By order of the Grand Regent, the fugitive Seraphus and her offspring are to be taken into custody immediately. Darius cracked his knuckles, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Well, Princess, he mused, time to decide. Stick with the charming, possibly unhinged stranger, or take your chances with the trigger-happy bucketheads. Seraphus hesitated for only a moment. Then she squared her shoulders and nodded. I must be out of my mind, she muttered. All right, stranger. Show me what you can do. Darius's grin widened. Oh, this is going to be fun. He stretched his arms. New challenge. Take out every soldier without moving my feet. And go! Blaster fire erupted around them, but Darius became a whirlwind of motion, his upper body twisting and contorting in impossible ways, deflecting bolts with his bare hands and sending them ricocheting back at the troops. All the while, his feet remained firmly planted on the ground. Seraphus watched in awe as he dismantled an entire squad without breaking a sweat. Her son cheered. Mommy! He's like a superhero! Seraphus exhaled, half in disbelief. I'm not sure hero is the right word, sweetheart, but he's certainly something. As the last soldier crumpled, Darius stretched lazily. Nice warm-up. So, Silver, ready to ditch this place? Seraphus nodded, still processing what she had just witnessed. Yes, but where will we go? Darius's eyes twinkled with mischief. Oh, I'm sure we'll figure something out. The galaxy's huge. Plenty of trouble to get into. He extended his hand. So, ready for the adventure of a lifetime? Seraphus hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was strong, oddly reassuring. I suppose I don't have much choice, do I? Oh, there's always a choice, Darius replied with a wink. It's just that some choices are a lot more fun than others. As they raced toward the docks, Seraphus had one overwhelming thought. She had just made a deal with an absolute madman, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what she and her son needed. A manic grin spread across Darius's face. Now this is where the fun begins. The ship's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the docking bay like a comet breaking through a planet's atmosphere. Seraphus clutched the seat beside him, her knuckles turning a pale silver as Darius sent the ship into a wild series of evasive maneuvers, weaving between the Dominion blockade. Lasers go pew-pew, Darius intoned solemnly. We zoom very fast. Please don't barf inside. Despite the sheer insanity of the situation, Seraphus found herself laughing. Her son Kale squealed in delight at each near miss and barrel roll. As they breached the upper atmosphere, a massive Dominion dreadnought loomed before them, its heavy cannons locking onto their ship. Uh-oh, Darius narrated. Big, scary ship. Time to do something really dumb. Hold on to your butts. He yanked the controls hard, sending them into a spiraling dive, directly toward the dreadnought's command bridge. Seraphus's stomach lurched, but she couldn't look away. At the last possible second, Darius pulled up, skimming the dreadnought's surface. The Dominion gunners, struggling to track such close movement, ended up firing on their own ship. Oopsie daisy, my bad, Darius cackled. Friendly fire's a real pain, huh? Now let's really get out of here. With a final burst of speed, they cleared the dreadnought's gravitational shadow. Darius's hand hovered over the hyperdrive lever. "Roses are red, violets are blue," he declared dramatically. "Time to make the jump. Whoo!" The stars stretched into endless lines, and they vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace. As the adrenaline rush faded, Seraphis slumped in her seat, exhausted yet exhilarated. She turned to Darius, who was lounging in the pilot's chair with his feet propped up on the console, casually munching on another one of those strange, spiky fruits. I don't even know where to begin," she said, shaking her head. "Who are you, really?" Darius shrugged, tossing the fruit core over his shoulder. "Told you, Silver, I'm just a guy looking for a good time." Then he grinned at her, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Though, I have a feeling things are about to get a lot more interesting with you two around." Seraphis couldn't help but smile despite herself. "You're absolutely insane. You know that, right?" "Sanity's overrated," Darius replied with a wink. "Now, how about we find somewhere fun to lay low for a while? I hear the burning ice fields of Vexus 9 are lovely this time of year." As Seraphis groaned and Kyle cheered, Darius leaned back, utterly content. For the first time in ages, he felt a genuine spark of excitement. Whatever came next, it certainly wouldn't be boring. The stolen starship hurtled through hyperspace, carrying its unlikely trio to an uncertain future. Darius sprawled in the pilot's seat, tossing a glowing energy orb between his hands like a bored child. Beside him, Seraphis sat rigid, her silver skin practically buzzing with tension. In the back, Kale giggled as he explored every corner of the ship, completely unfazed by their dangerous situation. "So, Silver," Darius drawled, breaking the silence. "Where to? Got any fun hideouts in mind?" Seraphis's violet hair swayed as she turned to glare at him. "This isn't a game! The entire Dominion fleet will be hunting us!" Darius's grin widened. "Exactly. Now that's what I call a party." He leaned in conspiratorially. "How about we crash the Grand Regent's winter retreat? I hear the security is top-notch." "Are you insane?" Seraphis hissed. "Probably," Darius admitted. "But again, sanity? Overrated." Before she could argue further, alarms blared. The ship shuddered violently as it was yanked out of hyperspace. "Oh, company," Darius said, studying the readings. "Looks like a full Dominion task force. This should be fun." Seraphis's face paled. "We're doomed." "Nah," Darius said, rolling his shoulders. "Just challenged." He cracked his knuckles dramatically. "All right, new parameters. Take out the entire fleet using only my left hand." Seraphis blinked. "That's... what?" Before she could protest, Darius sprang into action. With his right hand locked behind his back, he piloted the ship through impossible maneuvers. Their small vessel spun between warships, dodging laser fire with unnatural precision. Despite its small guns, every shot Darius fired struck exactly where it mattered. Shields failed, engines sputtered, and in minutes entire Dominion cruisers were reduced to drifting wrecks. Kyle clapped excitedly. "Do it again, Mr. Darius," Darius obliged, sending them into a corkscrew dive. "Your wish is my command, kiddo. How about we try this upside down?" The ship flipped, and Darius's left hand became a blur over the controls. More Dominion ships erupted in flames. Seraphis gripped her seat, watching in disbelief. How are you doing this?" Darius waved dismissively with his free hand. "Child's play. Now, if you want a real challenge, next time I'll do it blindfolded." As they jumped back into hyperspace, Seraphis found herself torn between frustration and grudging admiration. This human was either their salvation, or he was going to get them all killed in spectacular fashion. Days blurred together as they hopped from planet to planet, staying just ahead of the Dominion's reach. Each stop brought new dangers, and new, ridiculous, self-imposed challenges for Darius. On a jungle moon, he took down an entire garrison of Dominion soldiers while hopping on one foot and composing bad poetry. In a crowded spaceport, he sabotaged a battleship's reactor without using his hands, relying entirely on absurd dance moves. During a high-speed chase through an asteroid belt, he piloted the ship using only his elbows while juggling 3 of his beloved spiky fruits. Through it all, Kale was enchanted by his antics. The boy practically worshipped him, laughing at his every absurd trick. And Seraphis? She hated to admit it, but even she was starting to soften. One night they camped on a desolate desert world beneath twin moons. Kale had finally fallen asleep, curled up in a pile of blankets. Seraphis watched as Darius lounged by the fire, his usual mischief momentarily absent. "Why do you do it?" she asked softly. Darius flicked his eyes toward her, a flicker of something deeper flashing across his face. "Do what? Be devastatingly handsome?" he quipped. Seraphis rolled her eyes. "You know what I mean. The challenges, the jokes. You're powerful enough to rule the galaxy if you wanted. So why this?" For a long moment, Darius was silent, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "When you're unbeatable, life loses its flavor," he said. "These challenges, they're the only thing that make me feel alive anymore." Seraphis studied him, sensing something unspoken beneath his words. "But why seek that power in the first place?" A humorless smile flickered across Darius's face. "Once upon a time, I was just a scrawny kid, watching the strong crush the weak. I hated it." His fists clenched. "I swore I'd never be weak again." Then, just as quickly, his usual smirk returned. "But hey, enough of that sappy stuff. I bet I can juggle these embers with my toes." As Darius yelped dramatically, Seraphis found herself, despite everything, smiling. This man was more than he seemed, and she was starting to realize she might actually like him. A whirlwind of narrow escapes and increasingly absurd stunts, Darius's antics never failed to keep Kale entertained, even in the face of danger. During one particularly chaotic battle, as plasma fire rained around them, Darius scooped up the boy and spun him around, turning the firefight into an impromptu dance lesson. "All right, little prince," he grinned, effortlessly deflecting blaster bolts with one hand while twirling the giggling child with the other. "Time to practice your waltz. 1, 2, 3, dodge the explosion. 1, 2, 3, sidestep the laser. 1, 2, 3, duck the falling debris." Seraphis wanted to be furious, but the sound of Kale's laughter, so rare since their lives had been upended, melted her resolve. As the weeks passed, Seraphis found herself softening toward Darius. His reckless bravado and seemingly suicidal challenges still drove her insane, but she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest when she saw him with Kale, or the way her pulse quickened whenever he flashed that maddening, infuriatingly charming grin her way. For his part, Darius felt something shifting within himself. The constant need for ever more ridiculous challenges was slowly being replaced by simpler pleasures. Kale's delighted squeals when he showed him a new trick, or the rare, genuine smile that graced Seraphis's lips when she thought he wasn't looking. One night, as they huddled in the cramped quarters of yet another stolen ship, Kyle fast asleep between them, Darius found himself studying Seraphis's profile in the dim light, the elegant curve of her jaw, the way her violet hair framed her face. "You're staring," Seraphis murmured, eyes still closed. Darius smirked. "Can you blame me?" His voice was softer than usual, missing its usual teasing edge. "The view's not bad." Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his gaze. For a moment, the air between them crackled with something unspoken. Then, an alarm blared, shattering the moment. Darius was on his feet in an instant, his manic grin sliding back into place. "Showtime!" He spun toward the cockpit. "What do you say we give our Dominion friends a real spectacle this time?" Seraphis followed, shaking her head but unable to suppress her own smile. Just try not to get us all killed. Oh, ye of little faith, Darius winked. When have I ever let you down? The battle that followed was Darius's most audacious performance yet. He piloted their tiny ship straight through the heart of a Dominion armada, while balancing on one foot, eyes closed, and humming an off-key rendition of an old Star Pilot drinking song. Somehow, impossibly, they made it through. As the last Dominion warship erupted into flames behind them, Darius gave a theatrical bow. "Ta-da!" he announced. "Now that's what I call—" He trailed off, noticing Seraphis's expression. "What's wrong, Silver?" he asked. "Not impressed by my death-defying heroics?" Her brow furrowed. "It's not that." She gestured to the viewport, where the wreckage of an entire Dominion battle group now drifted in the void. "Darius, did you plan this?" Darius's grin turned just a little sheepish. "Well, maybe." Seraphis's eyes widened. "You led us into this trap on purpose?" "Hey," Darius held up his hands. "We needed to thin their forces eventually. Why not do it with style? You risked all our lives for, what, a thrill?" Now, let's not overreact," he said, waving a hand. "I had it mostly under control." He hesitated. "Like 60%. Before Seraphis could throttle him, another alarm blared. The ship's computer announced an even larger fleet approaching. Darius sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ah, that would be the backup. The one I maybe knew was coming." He flashed a hopeful grin. "Any chance you'll believe this was part of the plan?" Seraphis's glare could have melted reinforced hull plating. Darius nodded. "Fair enough. So, fancy a trip to that Dominion space station? I hear the view's stunning this time of year." As they rocketed toward what looked like certain doom, Seraphis genuinely couldn't decide if she wanted to kiss Darius or throw him out the airlock, possibly both. The Dominion space station loomed ahead, its defenses bristling with weapons, squadrons of fighters swarming like angry hornets. It was a death trap. And Darius was grinning like a lunatic. "Now this," he declared, cracking his knuckles, "is what I call a party." He leaned toward Kale. "Okay, kiddo. New challenge. Take down an entire space station while giving you your first piloting lesson." Seraphis's jaw dropped. "Darius, he's 5. Never too early to start." Before she could stop him, he plopped Kale into his lap at the controls. "Ready to be my little co-pilot, champ?" Kale squealed in delight, tiny hands reaching for the flashing buttons. The sound of incoming blaster fire filled the cockpit. Seraphis groaned. "This is insane!" Darius's laughter mingled with Kale's giggles as their ship spun through the chaos. Despite the absolute madness of it all, despite the danger, Seraphis felt something warm bloom in her chest. This ridiculous, impossible man had brought more light into their lives in mere weeks than she had known in years. As Darius expertly guided Kale's hands over the controls, weaving through a hailstorm of laser fire, Seraphis realized with a start. She wouldn't trade this for anything, not for safety, not for security, not for anything in the galaxy. The battle raged on. But somehow, between Darius's impossible skill and Kale's enthusiastic button mashing, critical systems across the station began to fail. "That's my boy!" Darius whooped as another explosion tore through the station. "You're a natural!" Seraphis, strapped into the co-pilot seat, alternated between gasping in terror and shaking her head in sheer disbelief. "Darius," she managed between barrel rolls, "when we survive this, if we survive this, we're going to have a long talk about appropriate activities for children." Darius winked. "Oh, come on, Silver. Nothing brings a family together like a little high-stakes space combat, right?" As if to punctuate his point, a massive explosion rocked the station. The alarms blared. Critical reactor overload imminent. "And that's our cue to make a dashing exit," Darius announced. He scooped up Kale, tossing him to Seraphis before slamming the ship into full throttle. The docking bay doors began to close. "Hold on tight, ladies! This is gonna be bumpy!" With a whoop of exhilaration, Darius sent the ship rocketing through the narrowing gap seconds before the blast doors slammed shut behind them. The station exploded behind them in a spectacular fireball. Darius executed a flawless barrel roll, then turned to his passengers with a satisfied smirk. "Now that," he declared, "is how you make an exit." Kale bounced excitedly in Seraphis's lap. "Again! Again!" Seraphis stared at Darius for a long moment. Then, to her own surprise, she laughed. "You," she said, shaking her head, "are completely insane." "Guilty as charged," Darius winked. "But admit it, Silver, you're having fun." Seraphis opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't, because, against all odds, against all logic, she was. He was silent, his gaze fixed on the endless stars beyond the viewport. For the first time since she had met him, Darius looked lost. "It's not exactly a bedtime story, Silver," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically somber. Seraphis reached out, her silver hand resting gently on his arm. "I'd like to know if you're willing to share." Darius took a deep breath, then nodded. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." He leaned back in his chair, eyes taking on a faraway look. "Once upon a time," he began, a wry smile tugging at his lips, "there was a scrawny kid on a backwater world. Nothing special about him, except maybe his knack for finding trouble. And boy, did he find it." As he spoke, the story unfolded like a living memory. He painted a vivid picture of a harsh world where the strong preyed on the weak, a world where a boy, helpless and powerless, watched everything he loved be torn away. "I lost everyone," Darius said quietly. "My family, my friends, all gone, because I wasn't strong enough to stop it." Seraphis's grip on his arm tightened, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "But you know what?" Darius continued, a fierce light sparking in his eyes. "I was never afraid, not once. I was angry, and I swore I'd become strong enough that nothing could ever hurt me or anyone I cared about again." His tale took a darker turn. He spoke of forbidden knowledge, of ancient artifacts and cosmic forces beyond comprehension, of sacrifices made and terrible prices paid. "I got what I wanted," he said, his voice hollow. "All the power in the universe." He exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening into fists. But it came at a cost. Seraphis frowned. "What do you mean?" Darius turned to her, something almost haunted in his expression. "I couldn't feel anything," he admitted. "Fear, joy, love, it all just faded away." He gestured broadly at the stars beyond the viewport. "So I started pushing myself. Crazy stunts, impossible odds. Anything to feel that rush again. Anything to remind myself I was alive." Silence settled between them, the weight of his words filling the cockpit. At some point, Seraphis's hand had moved from his arm to tightly grip his own. And now, without hesitation, she asked, "And now?" Darius turned to her, really looked at her. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, something he thought he had lost long ago. His gaze flickered to the sleeping Kyle, then back to Seraphis. "Now?" he echoed, a genuine smile replacing his usual cocky smirk. "Now, I think I might have found something worth more than all that power." Seraphis's breath caught in her throat. "Darius, Before she could finish, alarms blared through the ship. The moment shattered as they both snapped to attention. "Proximity alert," Darius announced, fingers flying over the controls. "Looks like your old Dominion friends found us again." Seraphis's expression hardened. "They won't stop, will they? Not until—" "Hey," Darius cut her off, that familiar glint of mischief returning to his eyes. "What do you say we put an end to this chase once and for all?" Seraphis blinked. "What do you mean?" Darius's grin widened. "I mean, let's go big or go home. One last hurrah. A message they won't forget." As he outlined his audacious plan, Seraphis felt a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. It was insane, obviously, but then again, when had anything about their journey been sane? "You're sure about this?" she asked, even as a smile tugged at her lips. Darius winked. "Silver, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He paused. "Well, except maybe my devastating good looks." Seraphis rolled her eyes, but there was no hiding the fondness in them now. "All right then," she said. "Let's do this." What followed was a storm of action, one that made every previous escape look tame in comparison. Darius piloted their ship straight into the heart of the Dominion fleet, weaving through battleships with impossible precision. But this time, there was something different about him, something more than just the thrill of the moment. As they neared the Dominion's flagship, Darius turned to Seraphis. "Ready for your starring role, Silver?" She took a deep breath, then nodded. "As I'll ever be." With a theatrical flourish, Darius opened a comm channel to the entire Dominion fleet. Seraphis's regal voice echoed through the airwaves, a scathing condemnation of the Dominion's tyranny, and a declaration of war. Meanwhile, Darius's hands became a blur over the controls. Weapon systems across the fleet malfunctioned. Battleships turned on each other. Engines died mid-flight. And through it all, their tiny ship danced through the chaos, untouched. And now, Darius grinned as pandemonium erupted. For the grand finale. He punched in a series of commands. Every screen across the Dominion fleet lit up. The Grand Regent, the most feared figure in the galaxy, appeared on every broadcast, dancing, badly, to an obnoxiously upbeat tune. "I may be evil," the fake regent declared cheerfully, "but deep down, all I ever wanted was to be a space interpretive dancer." The Dominion fleet descended into complete chaos. Darius rocketed their ship away from the wreckage, leaving behind nothing but utter humiliation. "And that," he declared with a smirk, "is how you make an exit." Seraphis burst out laughing, a sound so free, so genuine, that it made Darius's chest tighten. "You," she gasped between giggles, "are absolutely mad." "Guilty as charged," he winked. "But admit it, Silver, you wouldn't have me any other way." She opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't. Because, against all odds, against all logic, she wouldn't. As they drifted into deep space, Darius glanced at her, then at Kale. "So," Seraphis murmured, "where to now?" Darius's expression softened. "How about we find somewhere to call home?" he said. "Somewhere quiet." Then he smirked. "Relatively quiet." Seraphis's eyes widened. "You mean—" Darius nodded. "Yeah," he admitted. "I think it's time for a new adventure, one that doesn't involve quite so many explosions." He paused. "Maybe just a few for old time's sake?" As they set course for a distant, peaceful world, Darius felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. It wasn't the adrenaline rush he had chased for so long. It was something warmer, something real. And for the first time in his life, he let it in.